I'm Jim, and welcome to the weekly message from Hummelstown United Church of Christ, right here in Hummelstown, Pennsylvania. We're the small church with a big heart, a place where everyone is truly welcome and where all can belong. Whether this is your first time joining us or you're a familiar part of our family, we're glad you're here. To learn more about our community, visit us online at hummelstownucc.org. Now, let's open our hearts and prepare for today's message.
As I mentioned at the start of today's service, many of our elements come from our conference minister, our soon-to-be Keystone Conference transitional minister. This set of prayers and liturgies, these texts were written specifically for the purpose of recognizing specifically for the purpose of recognizing our heritage that stems from 300 years ago with the organization of the German Reformed Church on this continent. As our church dates itself as somewhere around 1766, we're not far off from that historic first service. Quite the solid rock of faithful people. As a queer person with a heart for the vulnerable, the victimized, and the oppressed, history is not often a comfortable discussion. And so that's something that we keep in mind this morning as well. That all people are not perfect, and no one time or era is without guilt in understanding our relationships to justice. And yet into that call, we have the opportunity to look into our past, into our future, and see where God is still calling us. A bit of data about the United Church of Christ in Pennsylvania for you. PA holds the spot as the top for number of congregations and number of members. Our congregations account for 12% of all UCC churches nationwide, 14% of UCC members. As for churches with historic roots, only 7% of UCC churches can date themselves to the same decade or before we can. To say that we have an active voice in the UCC is not to be taken lightly. Pennsylvania UCC churches hold a lot of the history of the Reformed Church in our archives, and with it, an amazing call to heal division, to commit to action on behalf of neighbors, to live in the acceptance of the gifts of others. This is a heritage upon which we are based and which can call us to even stronger alliances in the coming years. We are a church that has been a part of multi-point charges, that has worked with part-time and full-time staff and no staff, and that is located right in the midst of small town identity. Our ancestors planted here to make a statement. And on this anniversary week, we invite ourselves to ask what that statement might be coming towards us. In the history of the German Reformed Church, we find immigrants trying to make a way in this world, attempting to retain connections with history while engaging those around them. They worshipped in German counterculturally for many years, and yet had an intense American identity held just as valuable. The theology of the emerging German Reformed Church was based much in what came to be the Mercersburg theology, which has a very heavy emphasis on the incarnation, Jesus' bodiness. Its cardinal principle is the fact of incarnation, it's explained, that by adding Christ saves the world not ultimately by what he teaches or by what he does, but by what he is. And what does that mean for us? It means that it isn't about how good you can be, about how many rules you can perfectly follow throughout your life. Salvation is not a job, but a gift. Through all the shifting sands of life, God's salvation is that steady root that we can take hold of. Worship for this church was centered around the activity of worship, an altar, formal prayers, rather than a more lengthy sermon like the New England Congregationalists might have been more insistent on. So I hope that today you hear some of that history in our prayers, all of the stages of that history. The responsive prayers, the ones printed in your bulletins, our statement of faith from the 80s, because it is from this historical view that they are included into our modern worship styles. The word liturgy, after all, is derived from Greek liturgia, which means work or service of the people. Letos, derived from people, ergon, meaning work, service. This means that the worship service needs your investment just as much as the rest of church life. As we continue to move into new worlds, this insistence on the people's work is at the heart of our faith, and it means that we can never see any element of worship as a constant, because people continue to change, and what we need from worship continues to change with us as well. One of the texts I read over the summer mentioned that to engage the congregation deeply in the work of the people, they embarked on a time of purposeful discussion on worship that negotiated whether all elements of worship were non-negotiable, unquestioned, but not giving life anymore, that old favorite answer, because we've always done it, or what needed to be dropped. This is a critical engagement with the why of worship that I think helps to guide us in better understanding and advocating for the variety of needs and desires for a whole community that can be found in modern worship. Our heritage as a German Reformed congregation welcomes us to that critical dialogue with its history and with our present. Do the forms of worship still fit us? Why and how? What is most important for me to be able to share about my faith and my relationship with God? This is a question each of us is to ask ourselves. One of the things I came out of my sabbatical with was a desire to attempt and try and figure out how to worship without the Revised Common Lectionary set of scriptures. You don't know what they are. That's the 3-year cycle of reading that we have been using for the last 6 years, which means we've gone through 2 full cycles of this set. And that's not a bad thing. That's life-giving, too. And maybe it's an opportunity to try something new. And so I'm hoping that in the next year, we will be embarking upon a thematic style of worship, meaning a season at a time, using texts that we haven't heard before, or maybe we've only heard in short pieces, and it's time to lengthen out those selections. Will it develop our biblical understanding more? Will we find new words for worship or daily life in our stories outside of that traditional 3-year cycle? What have we never thought to read into the work of the people, the liturgy, before? Whatever the outcome, I hope that you will breathe deeply into the newness of this in the coming weeks, and that you can see how historically it is rooted. Philip Schaff said that the Reformation must be regarded as still incomplete. It needs yet its concluding act to unite what has fallen asunder, to bring the subjective to a reconciliation with the objective. By this, he was speaking to a reunion of Protestantism with the Roman Catholic Church. But reconciliation is something that is needed much more than just the separation of 2 sides of the Christian faith today. We are in the midst of another reckoning for the church as we try to live empathetically, as Jesus and God and the Spirit have invited us to do, while listening to others who use those same images of divine as a means to separate. The heart of Reformed heritage is unity through ecumenism extended toward all. And our texts today certainly make that same case. In a busy world creating division, the author of Ephesians and Jesus' sermon in Matthew welcome us to share in a fellowship that reconciles and is rooted in what will hold us steady. This is not acceptance of culture just because the powers of the world are more vocal than us. This is acceptance of our siblings of the divine and our investment in doing that which is hard, building spaces for God to dwell. It doesn't just mean that God, who is everywhere, will bless us and move on, but that God will be present with us and stay with us. Each week, our worship invites us to put our awareness on how God is with us, how God might remain with us even if we didn't know it. But what I'm suggesting is that we keep active track on where and how we feel God with us, and how we feel each other as God with us. And that we let that reform our worship and our weekday faith and even our social calendars. This coming January, I hope many of you will come and spend an afternoon or evening singing all the favorite hymns together so that we can create an ongoing list of the important hymns for us as a community. Not a prescriptive list, you must sing these in this order, but a conversational list. What songs, hymns, stories, worship elements have been cornerstones for your faith over your lives, so that we can support each other with an awareness and a strength as we worship that following Sunday and into the next year. Our heritage as the German Reformed tradition, that fifth of the UCC approximately, that is within our state's borders, has a remarkable gift to share. A story of resiliency and of wide acceptance, of an always present hope for reconciliation, even when it doesn't seem possible. Inclusivity as a critical understanding of God's mission to that early church, and one that we use to structure our faith life in our current moment. There are rules and sets of rules and boundaries and walls throughout our scripture. And yet, if we boil it down, they function more as fences than barrier walls. Human beings need boundaries, both for self-protection and to prevent interference with each other's lives. Don't kill, don't steal, don't commit adultery. They define boundaries. This is yours, this is mine. But to love one's neighbor is to honor their boundaries. And so I'm not saying that we eliminate boundaries, and that this isn't where peace comes from. Peace comes by eliminating hostility between the dividing walls. God, who is here with us and who is the rock upon which we make this church, does not merely tear down walls, but unites people in the one who is peace, creating one new humanity. Rather than building walls that separate to enclose ourselves in safety, the author of Ephesians urges us to see what it looks like to be built into a temple where God can stay. Christ is the cornerstone, sure, but that means that that cornerstone is surrounded by all those who are around it and supported by their neighbors. Our stones, our rock selves, lean upon each other to stay strong. Christ's cornerstone just helps to hold the shape. Leaning on each other, the church is made by supporting each other. And perhaps one way for the church to reconcile our historical authority with present experience is by taking on a renewed emphasis, individually, institutionally, collectively, on the essential identity between a relationship with God and how one lives in and on behalf of the world. That's what our heritage is calling for us to see today. Not just a veneration of the past, but a perspective on the future. For this week's work of the people, we share in gratitude for a God who called people to act in faith 300 years ago, and a God who calls us to act in faith today, this moment. As we sang in our first hymn this morning, we are your people, Spirit of grace. You dare to make us Christ to our neighbors of every culture and place. Because there is a spirit of love in this place. Because the church's foundation is built on the rock of faith and justice and kindness and recognition of humanity. May it be so today.